And for members of the viewing public, I want to remind the room here and those at home that this issue has been extensively discussed in public view. Very much appreciate the thoughtful comments today as well as in previous exchanges, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. We'll get back to what's before us. Any other comments specifically to 1705 as amended from committee? Commissioner Swan.
Yes, excuse me, I got lost there for a second. Are we voting on an amendment to allow coyote hunting in Chuck Swan?
I realize it's treated a little bit differently. I think because it hasn't been changed, we can consider all of the recommendation from committee. So it's already coming to us. It's already coming to us as amended, and so it's coming as a whole. We can treat it differently, and I'm getting a nod from our attorneys that's all right. So it's coming as amended to the committee.
Okay, so in other words, we can make several. We're not going to vote on each individual amendment. Okay. Well,
And as I recall, just to make sure I've got my parliamentary process right, there's only one amendment traveling with this related to Chuck Swan. Getting confirmation from our council. Great. Yes, so there is already, and that's as amended as a body. If you would like to propose an amendment one,
okay.
You're recognized.
I'm not proposing an amendment to the amendment that was made down there.
Correct.
I'd like to propose an amendment to allow the young sportsman's hunt at Chuck Swan to be a bonus buck for the young sportsman, to be commensurate with all the other drawn hunts around the state of Tennessee for the young sportsman.
There's a motion by Commissioner Swan. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Cox. I would like to understand the implications of this from the agency. Not sure, Chief Goodwin, who you'd like to speak on this? And if you need clarification on what it's been proposed, we can certainly give you that.
Yes, it is the one deer youth hunt that is not a bonus buck at this time, as I understand. John may add anything else. That the reason we didn't have it is some years ago, or several years ago, there was a heavy harvest of button bucks, and we felt that that was the case because of, again, it being a bonus deer at that time. Some other issues related to youth having, that were hunting the area, and that was the reason. John, do you need to clarify that a little more? Or?
Explain it if you want me to.
Sure, you'd probably do a little better since you have history
Okay.
with it.
As Mark mentioned, and the folks that have hunted Chuck Swan for years, we were having a steadily decline in the deer population. So approximately 5 years ago, I went through and looked at the data really hard. And one of the major reasons that we were looking at that looked like it was contributing to that decline was we were losing our recruitment of bucks into the population. During the either sex hunts, approximately a quarter of the harvest was button bucks. And interviewing the hunters at the checking station, they were bringing in very small deer, field dressing 20, 22 pounds. And the reasoning that they gave in killing such a small deer, it's a bonus deer. So we greatly reduced our archery either sex hunts, and then had all the hunts count toward the statewide bag limit. During that process, we had some very heated debates within the region on the juvenile hunt. And to remain consistent on Chuck Swan W. May, we went ahead and included the juvenile hunts. And I explained that to Commissioner Swan, and with that in mind, we're, as far as Region 4 and the Chuck Swan W. May staff, we're not in opposition of allowing that to be a bonus deer for the juveniles.
Any discussion from members of commission?
Yeah, I'd like to make one comment, and that is that statistics have shown that if a youth hunts one time and doesn't go additional times, there's very little chance that he'll be a lifetime hunter. Statistics have shown that exponentially greater chance of that hunter, that youth being a hunter for the rest of his life, the more times he hunts when he's a youngster. And by making the Chuck Swan Young Sportsman's Hunt a bonus deer, it would be commensurate with all the other wildlife management areas across the state. So it would make it an even playing field. And what are we talking about, 350 permits?
It's 200 quota, and they usually average around 50 deer on the hunt.
If I understand what our discussion was the other day, that at one time, the adult hunt was also a bonus deer, and I'm not proposing that we do that. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Having that deer count toward the statewide bag limit was part of the main reasoning to try to grow that deer herd, where those folks will have to think about what they're going to take instead of taking that fawn, if they want to take an antlerless deer, where they'll take a doe. And
I believe in our discussions that I was trying to find out, the density of the deer herd or the buck-to-doe ratio, and you guys said that you would do some surveys this year and come back next year with some more definitive answers. Is that correct?
We'll try to next
Yeah.
year. We're going to work on it. I'm not going to guarantee we'll have everything, but next year, I've already talked to James, and he's going to get with Dusty McCubbins, who's the area manager, and Dan Gibbs, who's the deer biologist for Region 4. We're going to try to come up with some surveys and see if we can't estimate the buck-doe ratio and try to look at maybe some fawn survival rates.
Yeah, maybe a few camera surveys.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion from commission? Any discussion from the public? Any comments? Yes, sir, welcome. And if you would reintroduce yourself again, and thank you.
Robert Brewer, and I'm going to introduce myself this time as a lifelong hunter of Chuck Swan. I killed my first deer at Chuck Swan. My daughter killed her first deer at Chuck Swan. It really, it broke my heart when it went to not a bonus deer anymore, because it took opportunity away from my kids. I would hope the commission would consider putting this back to a bonus deer. Those kids, a lot of them in that area, they have to make a choice. Do I put in for Chuck Swan? Or do I go on the statewide hunt? And if they go to Chuck Swan and they get lucky and they kill deer that first day, they're done for the juvenile weekend in that part of the area. So I would ask you to go back and look at that and make it a bonus deer again. Give them an opportunity. Like you said, it's 50 deer. My daughter always did very well. She killed one every year she was up there. Loved the area, but it was always a choice. And my son, we didn't put him in for Chuck Swan because it wasn't a bonus deer. So thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, move to the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You adopt. Back on Proclamation 1705. Any further discussion? Any further discussion from members of the public? That said, all those in favor of Proclamation 1705 as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You adopt. We'll now move to Proclamation 1706.
Yesterday, we presented changes to Proclamation 1706, and we now recommend passage of that proclamation, which is hunting seasons and bag limits on select national wildlife refuges and other federal refuges. There were 2 hunt changes within that proclamation.
I have Proclamation 1707, pardon me, 1706, apologies. I'll recognize Commissioner Cook for
Well,
motion.
committee met and we voted for approval for Proclamation 1706.
Great, and 1706 came unamended from committee. It is fully before us. Is there any discussion on this proclamation from commission? Any comments from members of the public? That, all those in favor of Proclamation 1706, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You adopt. And I would like to recognize Chairman Cook. He wanted to make sure we have an opportunity, both for our guests and important members of the public here today, to clarify an issue from yesterday.
Yeah, Mr. Williams, I just wanted to say, maybe you could watch the video from yesterday and get much of your questions answered, but I wanted to, the big issue, we keep discussing the doe harvest, and if you look at the 10-year average, last year's doe harvest was only 1.3% off the 10-year average. We've had swings in that 10 years from about 6% more does down to 5% less. So, you know, it's a 1 year, and you could be absolutely correct. It could be that it is going to significantly affect the doe harvest, but as of this first year, it doesn't show that. Over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll learn more, and then we'll have more information. But just want to give you that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now move to Proclamation 1707. Chief Goodwin.
Yesterday, we presented basically a housekeeping change to that proclamation, that being the statewide fur bearer hunting and trapping. Because of a TCA law that, because of private acts that were eliminated regarding fox hunting, then we struck that language out of the fur bearer proclamation to acknowledge that the elimination of the private acts. So the full determination of fox seasons being under the commission, and basically just that housekeeping change was all there was.
Great. Commissioner Cook?
Wildlife Committee met, and we voted for approval of Proclamation 1707.
Commissioner Cook moves. Is there a second? A second by Commissioner Stroud. It is before us. It came unamended from committee. Any discussion from members of commission? Commissioner Woods?
Can you hear me now? There we go. Yesterday we heard from some East Tennessee coon hunters, and I realize there's coon hunters all over the state, but the East Tennessee coon hunters that spoke yesterday would like to see the season move from July to September 1st. And I was going to ask you, Director Carter, if there's a way that we could get some some more coon hunters across the state, some of these coon clubs, and kind of get a feel for what the other clubs are thinking. I know we just heard from one yesterday, and I guess we need to hear from some others to see what they think about moving it back to September 1st. Their concern is they've still got little ones in July.
Yes, Commissioner Wood, we do have some surveys planned and that would be kind of all-encompassing, and that can certainly be part of it. I don't know time-wise exactly how long it's going to take through our contractor to get that done, but we can certainly make an effort through the people in each local county to meet with whatever organized people that they have in the way of coon hunters, and we can certainly have that back to you. It won't be a scientific survey, but we can give you back the feedback from those groups on how they feel, in addition to whatever written comments we get.
That'd be great. Yeah, that's. I don't know. I guess coon clubs, do they have to register with the agency?
No, sir.
Okay. All right.
There are some that do through Secretary of State's office, depending on how they set up their own charters and so forth, but they don't
Okay.
have to register through the agency.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Swan?
Other than the antlerless rule, or the antler rule that was passed last year, I've gotten more calls about the raccoon season and more emails than any other topic. And I'd like to propose an amendment that we move the raccoon season to September 1st.
So motion by Commissioner Swan. Is there a second?
Well, I'll go ahead and second it.
Second by Commissioner Woods. Is there discussion on the amendment?
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Cox?
I've gotten calls and I have talked to the agency about population, and I've talked to the local raccoon hunters in my area who I consider to be professionals, that's all they do and they hunt every day. And their response is that first it's July and August and they don't hunt but a couple of days a week because their dogs get overheated, and they don't kill a lot of the raccoons. And the agency has said there is no population issue, and in fact we probably got more than we've ever had. So I think the number of calls you get has to do with a club that might be opposed to it, and they send out numbers to their members, and you might get 10 or 15 or 20 emails and calls. Also, some of this is coming from East Tennessee, and if you remember last year when we had the fire in all of Gatlinburg, it was a drought, and you know, Prentice Cooper and some of the places up here had lack of water on the mountains and probably food, and the raccoons had to leave to go survive and left the typical areas. So I think some of this is a knee jerk for 1 year that caused by some weather problems, and I just don't think it. I think that moving this is going to upset a lot more hunters than we're going to appease by doing it. I don't think there's an issue with the resource.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cook, this is an issue that was before your committee yesterday. Do you have any comments?
Well, I think it's much like we talked about yesterday, that as Commissioner Cox said, 1 year doesn't really mean much. You know, I'm a avid duck hunter, and some years I wonder why I'm sitting here cold and wet because I don't see any ducks, but it's just the way it goes some of those years. And we have the east side of the state's having a problem, the west side of the state has no problem. And again, I think it's just a 1 year event. If we start to see a trend of 2 to 3 years, then I think it's significant. So I think we just need to be patient, be deliberate, just wait and see what happens. We hear the concerns, and just as the antlerless deer, maybe it is a problem, but 1 year doesn't show that it's a problem. So I'd say let's just be patient, and I would vote against this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any further discussion? Commissioner Swan?
Yes, how many years has the raccoon season started in July?
Just last year was the only season time what that commission action was approved. So we've just had the 1 year now where we've had the private lands only raccoon hunting season that started from July 1 and runs to the regular opener, which opens on the third Friday in September.
Okay, thank you.
And further clarification, current policy is that training is allowed all year round.
Yes.
That's not something that's changed in recent years.
That-
So in terms of
It
the
didn't
ability
change training.
for running those, excellent. Thank you for the clarification. Any further discussion from members of? Yes, sir, Commissioner Gardner.
Given that this is recently brought up and the other coon hunters across the state haven't had a chance to examine how it would adversely or positively affect them, I would like to at least delay this decision until the word can get out and people have a chance to see how it impacts the entire state rather than just one area. Unless you're talking about a regional amendment, I would have to be against this.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Is there any?
I was just going to throw out as a note, we had 13 comments, I believe, that had opposed it and two to keep it. So it was still relatively,
Would you repeat that again, Chief? I'm not sure I understand.
on the comments related to the summer raccoon season, there were 13 comments we received that were opposed to it, two supporting it, but relatively, again, in the perspective of things, relatively small number of comments, and we will actively try to solicit from the raccoon hunting clubs that we're aware of more of their feedback on this issue as you desire.
Thank you, Chief.
May I ask a question?
Commissioner
It might have
King?
been- I might have missed it, probably did, but the reason it was changed last year was because the coon hunters requested it?
Correct.
Okay.
That was the user request.
Any further discussion from members of commission? Any discussion or comments from members of the public? Is there, we'll move back to discussion. Commissioner Swan, you want to move forward? Very happy to call the vote.
Yeah, I'm ready for a vote.
Okay. Sponsors request a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment proposed by Commissioner Swan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. The noes have it. Fails.
Division of the House.
Would you like to request a roll call vote? Is that what you're asking for?
I would, because I don't hear good.
Excellent. Okay, want to make sure we're clear on what we're doing. We're going to go to a roll call vote. And I'm going to give Danette an opportunity to get her book ready. And what you're voting on is on the amendment that Commissioner Swan has made to change the date for opener of raccoon season from July to September.
Okay. Chad Baker. Aye. Oops, I got the wrong one. Tony Sanders.
Aye.
Connie King.
No.
Bill Cox.
No.
Angie Box. No. Dennis Gardner.
No.
Bill Swan.
Aye.
Brian McLaren.
No.
Kent Woods. James Stroud. Kurt Holbert.
No.
Jeff Cook.
No.
Jamie Woodson.
No. I have a count of 9-4, 9 noes, 4 ayes. Is that accurate? My hearing's better than I thought. It fails. Excellent. Any further discussion on Proclamation 1707? And again, I think to honor the request that was made, I very much appreciate, and I know Commissioner Woods does as well, the opportunity to hear, and Commissioner Swan, of course, from the leaders of organizations around the state and sportsmen and women around the state who would want to weigh in on this issue. It's obviously still live and would continue to want to learn more from important constituency groups in each of our grand divisions. Excellent. Move now to Proclamation 1704, Manner and Means. Yes, sir.
Yesterday, Colonel Ryder presented changes to Proclamation 1704 related to adding information in there because of TCA law regarding traps was amended, and so we accommodated those changes for clarification in manner and means. And if Colonel Ryder's here, I don't know, any other questions come up, I will gladly refer those to Colonel Ryder on this.
Well, and I do want, my apologies for not paying very close attention, but I do think that Mr. Williams made an important point earlier to make sure that we know exactly what we're voting on. And so will you kind of clarify what the proclamation covers?
Yes, ma'am. That's Proclamation 1704, which is the manner and means of hunting, taking, and trapping. The suggested recommended passage of the amendments were on 2 things. Section 3, which is the trapping devices and definitions, and that's a result of the public chapter that was passed that will become effective July 17th. And those incorporated 3 things that allowed the commission to adopt rules or pass this proclamation amended changes for types of steel traps, placement of the steel traps, and inspection times of the steel traps. And that was incorporated in the changes that was presented yesterday. And one other technical cleanup was in Section 6 on big game check-in. It made it clear that all animals have to be checked in and not just the ones that are gifted to another state or, I'm losing my thought, gifted to a person or leave the state. And those were the changes that were presented yesterday.
Great. Chairman Cook?
Wildlife Committee voted to approve Proclamation 1704.
Moved by Chairman Cook, seconded by Commissioner Swan. Commissioner Swan, question?
I've got one comment, point of order. All of us on the commission have a computer up here so that we know what's going on. The people in the audience do not see what's going on, and it would be helpful, I think, if the proclamations could be up on the screen for the attendees.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and if we could I've got a handful of notes on perhaps second day improvements that I might work with the agency on. I think one is a reminder of the slide on the proclamation, including language on the amendment, and making sure every member of the commission has a copy of any amendment that's passed and that the public has it available in the room. So we'll do that moving forward. Excellent suggestion. Commissioner Baker.
I'd like to make a comment. We had a discussion yesterday with Colonel Ryder that by the next meeting, he would come back to the commission with some ideas of means and manners that the agency would feel like on coyote hunting at night with shotguns only, and some time frames that were not during a big game season. If he could bring that back, I just want to remind him to bring that back to us by the next meeting, something that we would want to come back and revisit means and manners at that time.
Great. And,
Yes, sir.
and just to make sure that we're clear, as I recall, the action of the committee did not act to approve that proposal, but for you to come with thoughts for discussion purposes. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am, that's all I wanted.
I really appreciate that. Just wanted to make sure I understood the committee action yesterday, but appreciate the follow-up on that very much. Yes, sir.
I think you got Commissioner Cox twiddling his fingers.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox, for your patience.
I brought up big game check-in yesterday, and there was not really a consensus about, and I didn't make an amendment, and I'm not sure I am now, but, and I understand there's discussion and there's a plan and we're gonna hurry up and do it, but I think this is one of the more important things that we've got pending because of the lack of, maybe the lack of data or the question of whether we're getting every animal checked in, which I firmly believe we're not, especially in turkeys. But I'd like to know from the chair how we're going to address this. I mean, it's something that we need to do. It doesn't seem to me that it's a difficult. If we go to a harvest card and a shorter check-in time, it gives the law enforcement something to do. And it may not be perfect, but other states are doing it, and it seems to be working. It's better than what we've got. So, I hate to be insistent, but it seemed like to me that this is important enough to come to some resolution about what we're going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And by Chairman, are you asking me?
Either you or Commissioner
Right.
Chairman Cook, either one. I know, we seem to be, let's wait till next year, but, we got a turkey season coming up in the spring, and if we don't do something today or even July and delay the hunting guide until we make a decision, we're going to have another year where the abuse of the system is going to continue. So I'm concerned about that.
Right. And first, want to appreciate your important concerns, given that you're a member of the Wildlife Committee. We have 6 members of the committee plus the chairman of the commission who serve on that committee. And I would love to turn to Chairman Cook. I think this is a very appropriate conversation. Different members of the committee may feel differently about this issue, but would love to turn to you and ask you about any thoughts you might have related to Commissioner Cox's comments.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree totally with Commissioner Cox, and I think the agency agrees as well that we would like to have a tagging program, but, we discussed this yesterday and we discussed it 3 or 4 meetings ago, and we talked about the best way to tag that is going to give us the most compliance and the most data is the most expensive. And it'd be great to have it, we just can't afford it. And we're trying to come up with other ways that probably aren't gonna be as enforceable, but it's better than nothing. And as Michael May mentioned yesterday, we think maybe through the branch system, there could be some possibilities to do that cheaper. Again, not as good, we just can't afford the Cadillac. So I think it's a big problem. I think the agency does as well. It's just really coming down to a budget issue and trying to figure out a better way to do it.
Any further discussion on Proclamation 1704? Commissioner Holbert? And then Commissioner Swan.
If I could speak on the tag in just a minute.
course.
I would just like to agree with you two that I think it's very important that we address this issue. Maybe getting in I would love to see us have something in place by turkey season. I don't know if it's possible. But I am wondering if the commission needs to direct the agency. I don't want to see this get set on the table and just sit there. And it seems to be kind of what happened the last time we brought it up.
Right.
We kept asking and asking, and it just kept getting put off. And I believe the support's here on the commission. And I believe the overwhelming majority of the Wildlife Committee would agree that we want to see something. We want to see a solid proposal.
So here's how I'm going to propose we move forward. In a committee system that's high functioning, particularly when the chairman and now a total of 3 members of the committee have spoken about this strong desire for a solid proposal. I'm confident that other members of the commission have this. It's a challenging issue that doesn't have a simple answer, and it would be my great preference that the committee take the lead on sorting through all of this, and any commissioner who doesn't happen to serve on that committee, really want to encourage them to share their thoughts appropriately with Ed Carter and others, to make sure that we make progress. I think there is a clear interest by commission to help understand in answering this, and a desire for due diligence to find a workable answer. I'm not sure beyond that commission taking action in this moment, but I really want to encourage Chairman Cook to do the important work of that committee. This does seem like the appropriate place, and if there's a suggestion that it go to a different committee, I'm happy to, outside of this meeting, consider that, but it seems very appropriate in wildlife as it has been. So no disagreement, and I'd love to turn to Director Carter, but I want to make sure that the committee system functions in the most productive way. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just as a way of remembrance or clarification, y'all have charged us to look at that, and we put together 4 teams of people and spent 2 months looking at different tagging alternatives, talking to other states, talking to all the people that we know that could have some influence on that. We brought that before the commission and said, here are the alternatives that we think might actually work. Here are the price tags on them. And that's what we laid out. And I don't mean this flippantly at all, but we did beat that to death inside the agency and brought to you the only things that we thought might work. There are lots of things that could probably do, and maybe it might have a psychological effect, but in the real world, in terms of practical events, we didn't bring those to you if we knew that they weren't going to actually be meaningful. And we will be more than glad to go back and keep readdressing whatever there happens to be in the way of things going forward, and we can go backward and look at those again. But I just didn't want you to leave the meeting thinking that we hadn't spent time. We spent a tremendous amount of man hours looking at that over a 2-month time period, and brought to you what we thought were the only things that would work. So we'll be glad to continue on the committee level or any other level that we should look at it. And we do know there's things coming forward that may actually apply that aren't available to us yet, but we'll certainly be on top of those. But just wanted you to know that's kind of where we were inside the agency.
I might suggest, because we have 6 new members of commission, first, thank you, Director Carter, that if there's a synopsis of that proposal, they didn't have the benefit of that deep conversation, and to the extent that the Wildlife Committee wants to continue that conversation, but I think all of the members of commission could benefit from the exploration and the work that the agency's already done. And so if you all could do that electronically for them, that would be all of commission. That would be very, very helpful, and would certainly welcome as the agendas get set moving forward, if you want to bring something on this topic forward later. Does that work for you?
Yes, I agree. But at the same time, again, this is in no way saying I don't think it's important. I do. I'd love to have a tagging system, as I think all of us would. But as Director Carter said, I don't want the agency spinning their wheels just to tell us all about something we're going to say we can't afford. You know, we just keep shopping for something we aren't going to buy. And no reason to waste that time. We need to, take a different approach. And I'm hoping IT is the approach. We have a new opportunity we didn't have before. And I'd like to take some time exploring that. And again, it's probably not going to be perfect, but it's maybe we can afford it, and it's better than nothing. And, sometimes we're going to have to just compromise for what we can afford. So that's my opinion.
I happen to agree with you, but Commissioner Cox?
I'd like to ask Michael May, since we've talked about Brant and IT, the opportunity is for the new app that we may or may not go to when the contract runs out on the current app. When does that contract run out? When will that take effect? In
about a year and a half.
Okay, so
roughly.
If we're waiting on digital, it's going to be a year and a half before we consider a new contract for a different app if we decide to go that way.
Correct, but we should start working right now on how to make that work, which we are.
Well, I understand, but I'm talking about as far as tagging, it's going to be down the road before we can address it.
I would say so, but we can probably take a look, and we've mentioned it before out of committee. some of the things that we're looking at. Some of the things that we're looking at, maybe being able to print unique QR codes or barcodes or something like that. I won't get into all the boring details here. But those types of ideas that we can potentially print out on the 8.5 by 11 that people have out there at their home, or one of the places where they go to the agent, or even on some of the durable stock paper. So we're taking a look at those things that they cannot print and keep on copying. And when they scan it, this is just a hypothetical thought we've been having just to let you know. So when they scan that and it's gone, even if they print that paper out multiple times and that particular tag is gone and used. Those are concepts that we're looking at. We're still going through those phases right now.
And just-
Madam Chairman, thank you, Michael. I'd like either a resolution from the commission, or I'll make an amendment. And I think a resolution is more appropriate. Sounds like that's what you would prefer, but I think we're probably gonna miss the hunting guide this year if we don't pass something today. But I would propose it to you that we ask the agency to come back with something similar to a harvest card, or similar to what Mr. May's talking about by the July meeting. Whatever it is, we would probably go to a 1 or 2 year introduction to get our hunters acclimated to a new system anyway. And we wouldn't have to have it in the hunting guide. We could put it out in digital media and whatever. So, you know, I think they are looking perhaps for some guidance or some direction, and I think what they brought us was too expensive. We couldn't do it. So nothing's going to be perfect. If it's a harvest card that other states are using, there may be some holes in it. There may be some way to give it individualized where they can't copy it. You could work through that, but in a couple of months, maybe you could come back with something that might not be perfect, but it might be okay that we could implement and get it started for then if something comes up with digital, we can change it, but we're not going to do it next year because we'll miss the hunting guide. But you know, I would put that into a proposal for a resolution to direct them to come up with something similar to that, or you know, I understand they've come up and worked hard, but what they came up with was trying to come up with a perfect system that costs too much, and we can't do that. So maybe the next step, perhaps.